Okay, everybody, thank you. Welcome back. This is the second of the debate sessions. There will be two more debates in this. Just before we start, I need to remind you that the people who are debating, what they're saying are arguments that are part of a class exercise. They do not necessarily represent their own personal views. They had no choice over their debate topic, and they had no choice of what their position was going to be. So what they're saying might not necessarily reflect their position on any of these subjects. Okay, and that's the disclaimer out of the way. So we'll start with the first debate. The first debate is live animal markets around the world should be banned to avoid human health risks. What we'll do is we'll have, first of all, have 4 minutes for the team that is yes, they should be banned, and then we shall have 4 minutes for the team that says they should not be banned. So, team that is for yes, they should be banned, please unmute yourselves now. And I will start the magic timer. You have up to 4 minutes, and go.
Sadie, feel free to begin.
All right. So illegal and unregulated wildlife is widely known to be a major threat to ecosystems, biodiversity, and endangered species. Jinfeng Zhao, Secretary General of the China Biodiversity Conservation, mentions that more than 70% of human diseases are from wildlife, and many species are becoming endangered by eating them. If we continue sending these animals to live markets and eating these endangered species, we will be contributing to their extinction, and we will therefore be causing a loss in biodiversity. Today, more than 9,000 species are being threatened with extinction because of the live markets. Some of these species include crocodiles, wolf pups, and civets, which is a cute little nocturnal animal that looks similar to a cat.
Many of these animals are being kept or often put in cages too small with little regard and care for their well-being. The majority of these animals are being captured illegally and end up suffering and become too distressed to move and eat and function as they once did. All of these animals end up either being sold off as food, medicine, pets, or used to breed more to be sold off. Since most of these animals are wild, many are not used to captivity and end up hurting the owners and themselves in the process. The sale and trade of a lot of these exotic and endangered animals end up being illegal to obtain and transport, which only helps fund a multi-billion-dollar global black market.
These animals are being kept in small, unsanitary cages that allow them to easily spread diseases to one another and to human beings. With 70% of all human diseases being predicted to originate in animals, these markets are a crazy hotspot for diseases to spring up. On top of all this, the way the animals are being kept in these live markets is completely inhumane, with regulating bodies having effectively no control over the treatment of these animals. These animals aren't just unsanitary, they're also suffering. Keeping all of these creatures, according to Stephen Olszewski, a professor of wildlife health at Cornell, allows pathogens to meet species they have never previously encountered. This is a great way to make new diseases.
Live poultry markets are speculated to be a major risk factor for human infection. Sporadic human H5N1 bird influenza virus infections constantly continue to occur in China. Between October 2005 and June 2010, there were 38 confirmed human cases of this infection, with a mortality rate of 65.7%. This genotype of the virus was isolated from 4 of the 6 live poultry markets sampled. The virus spreads easily among birds through their saliva, nasal secretions, feces, and food. They can acquire the virus from contaminated surfaces such as cages. Bird droppings also contain this virus and can contaminate equipment, vehicles, shoes, clothing, soil, dust, and water. This disease is easily transmitted, making it a danger to those who go to live markets and come in direct contact with sick or dead birds. Live poultry markets are a major risk factor for human infections. Therefore, measures are needed to be taken in the live poultry market to reduce human infection.
Furthermore, it's believed that COVID-19 originated in a Wuhan market in China. And I just want everybody in this debate to think about, with COVID-19, how much our lives have changed, how many people that you know have got sick or have maybe even died from this infection. Is this worth it to keep these live animal markets open? I do not believe so. that concludes our opening argument.
Well done, because you're exactly on 4 minutes. Okay, so that was the argument for banning live animal markets. We'll now hear the other team. So this is the team against banning live animal markets. You have 4 minutes starting from now.
Is it okay if I share a PowerPoint before we start?
Absolutely. Give me a sec. If you'd asked me that a minute ago, I would be fine. But give me 2 secs. We will just... you should be able to share your screen. So give me 2 secs and I'll restart the timer. You have 4 minutes starting from now.
Okay, so our position was that live animal markets should not be banned internationally, and we covered it in 4 different parts, which are cultural, environmental, and economic effects. And then we're going to finish off by talking about implementing regulations rather than just banning the markets outright. So to start, live animal markets typically rely on small-scale animal husbandry, and the methods that are used in this type of farming is more sustainable than traditional typical industrial systems that we see, for example, in the United States. And it also is associated with lower greenhouse gas footprint. And then these methods of farming also use less pollution, cause less pollution in both air and water, and use less antibiotics, which when antibiotics are used in farming, it can cause antibiotic resistant bacteria, which can be dangerous. And then they also don't rely on refrigeration when you have a live animal market, which is really energy intensive, so that saves some energy. And it also doesn't rely on food processing, which can cause pathogens. And then banning live animal markets would take away from essential sources of food for many, many people, and also take away jobs for many, many people.
So for the economic effects of this, it's gonna drastically reduce, it's gonna negatively impact a bunch of low-income families because most of these markets are very well priced, which is where a lot of these families are getting their food, and they're super easily accessible because they're just right out in the open. Also, the live markets in China are about 30 to 59% of their food supply. So if we were to take these markets away, it would be drastically decreasing their food supply. And pretty much all of China purchases their foods from these markets. Also, back in 2003, during the SARS outbreak, they did ban live animal markets, and that ended up making the sales go to the black market. So everything that was being sold legally ended up being sold illegally. So instead, we decided to have to talk about regulations instead of just completely getting rid of these markets.
Yeah, and so the World Health Organization safety and animal disease expert Peter Ben Embark said that because live animal markets are critical, rather than outlawing them, we should just focus on improving them. Some of the regulations that should and could be put into place are proper hygiene and waste management practices, the separation of animals from other products, and the banning of sales of endangered and diseased animals. And this would help some of the things that were brought up in the other argument, as well as making sure that the other cultural, environmental, and economic effects will not be negative, but rather everyone can still be positive if we have these regulations.
Okay, you have 10 seconds. You're like 3 minutes 50. Okay, we'll move on to the next phase. Can you just stop sharing your screen there? Thanks, thank you. Okay, so the next section is the rebuttals. So in this, what we're going to do first is the team for banning live animal markets. It's not going to present any new information. It's just going to critique some of the arguments presented by the team against banning live animal markets. You have 3 minutes starting now. If any time you want to yield your time, just let me know.
to open up our response regarding your statement that over 30% of Chinese individuals purchase their goods from live markets. It is more likely that they purchase these from wet markets, which are simply markets that sell non-perishable goods that aren't necessarily live. A CNN article from April 2020 believes that a majority of Chinese individuals buy their food from these markets in which the food has already been killed. Some, but not all, sell live animals. The way these animals are being kept is disgusting. They are being able to just live in their own feces, in their own urine, and as well as their own blood. The way they're kept is inhumane. As the longer they live, the more likely they are to produce more waste that can spread diseases. Overall, it's just way more humane.
This sounds like new information. You can only respond to what the other team is saying. I have to be fair on this. I'm sorry.
Pardon me. Then I'll just repeat: inhumane. It's better to just kill the animals.
Sorry to interrupt you.
You're good.
Okay. You guys still have a minute and a half, so if anyone else wants to present any arguments against, issue any rebuttals.
You guys mentioned enforcing better hygiene practices and food safety standards. I think that these live markets have been going on for long enough. If they were going to have enforced any more cleanliness and stuff, they would have, but instead they continue to keep these animals in these nasty, dirty, rotting cages.
You guys also said how the animals are being traded legally. Well, most of these animals are actually are exotic and endangered animals being transported illegally out of different countries to these live animal markets.
If you have 30 seconds left, if you want to yield your time, that's totally fine.
To conclude, I would just say we should focus on preserving human and animal life rather than economics. And we will yield our time.
Thank you. You had 10 seconds left anyway. Okay, so that is the rebuttals of the team for banning live arguments against the team against banning live arguments. The against team, you can now issue your rebuttals. Remember, you should not present any new information, but just criticize the arguments the other team made. We have 3 minutes starting now.
So first off, what Sadie said about if they would have been enforced already, then we would have already done it. But is that not the same with banning? If it was so bad, wouldn't they have already banned it? I think that the COVID-19 that you guys have brought up is playing a big part. And so I think that can also go forward of why we would enforce these new practices. Jonah mentioned that the animals are kept in bad conditions. And that is why we talked about doing different waste managements and raising the animals differently and those kind of different practices. Also, economics were brought up and how they should rather have, that we need to care more about human life rather than economics. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think economics has a lot to do with human life. I think that without human life, we have no economics, and without economics, we have no human life. They go hand in hand. So improving human life goes with improving economics and vice versa. We also, you guys talked about how we should ban it. And like we said, when it was banned, there was even more illegal trading of these animals. And so again, I think banning it would make it so even more of it became illegal. Another thing that was brought up is the endangered species. And that was another thing that we had said was to ban endangered species, wild species, and disease species as well, which would help limit the sale of those species as well.
You have just about 30 seconds left. So if you want, you can yield your time, or if the team has anything else, feel free to add. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, okay. Yep. We're now going on to the closing arguments. So each team has 1 minute of closing arguments. The team for banning, you will go first. You have 1 minute for closing, starting now.
To conclude, live animal markets are not just the origin places of diseases that have killed millions of people, including some of our friends and family. Their conditions are completely inhumane. Their existence threatens biodiversity and our ecosystem, and they serve as local centers of animal cruelty. We aren't just letting millions of humans die by continuing live animal markets, we're also letting millions of animals be killed too. Overall, live animal markets are killing pens for everybody. We yield our time.
Okay, thank you guys. The against team, you now have 1 minute for closing arguments, starting now.
In conclusion, we think that rather than abolishing the live animal markets, we instead just focus on improving them. When we can use this and the World Health Organization can definitely help with this, as long as other governments. The people need these markets for their cultural and environmental health, as well as economic effects. I'd like to close with a quote by Peter Ben Embark, which I have mentioned earlier, that these markets provide a fresh and affordable food for millions. They can be made safe.
Okay, and that concludes the debate. First of all, big round of applause for all you guys. That was awesome, very well researched. We're now going to open it for questions. So I've not put anybody on mute, you are only muting yourselves. If anyone has a question, feel free to just either put it in the chat or chime in and tell me who that, but start off by saying who that question is to. Is it to the for team, the against team, or both? And the teams themselves can ask each other questions at this point.
Will this ban selling lobsters in the grocery stores in the United States?
It's a good question. Would you include the team that's for banning? Would you also include places selling lobsters, live lobsters, grocery stores in the US?
If those lobsters have not been properly sanitized to a standard decided by local or federal government, then I would say yes.
Okay, because there's no more further questions and you're getting a bit of a stinker off me. So, the for banning team, you're saying that it should be banned for removing human health, because it benefits human health. Well, how many a lot more people globally die because of foodborne illnesses prior to the beginning of 2020. And live animal markets are a very good way of reducing foodborne illnesses because it keeps it fresh. So how would you reconcile, how do we balance the human health effects of fresh food versus transmissible diseases?
Howard.
Haley mentioned a little bit, and so maybe she can hop in. She had a little bit more research on this part, but just the different ways of, I don't know. You told me I had to do this argument. I think that, sorry, I keep going back to the regulations, but really, I think, and that's part of like the lobster. It's like, well, if it were cleaned correctly, it's like, well, so we have regulations. And I think having those be put globally can help those different things, and maybe having, I don't know a ton about them, but maybe having separate markets for just animals compared to other foods and just keeping it cleaner. I don't know.
Okay, does anybody from the other team want to respond, or anyone else respond?
Yeah, I'll just talk for a little bit about what I was saying earlier. So with like the fresh food, so like the live animals, you don't have the processing or like any of that. So that prevents some of the pathogens and stuff, which will come in and create like diseases and such. And then it also, like I was saying before, with like less antibiotic use, it's actually beneficial in times like now, where if you have a food that's like creating antibiotic resistant bacteria, it's can create complications in like treating secondary infections that can come along, especially during like a pandemic time like now. So just like outright abolishing these is kind of like focusing on more like Western view, like ways of farming, and like having a one set mind on the way we should be producing our food.
Okay. Someone else chimed in just before Haley. Do they want to add?
The last thing I have to say is when it comes to regulations, as nice as worldwide regulations would be through the World Health Organization, the World Health Organization is an agency of the United Nations. And if we look at the timeline of the United Nations, we see their ineffectiveness on a global scale. So personally, I think if we were to not outright ban live animal markets and we were to implement regulations, we would have to do it through an organization better than the World Health Organization or an organization with more power. And I believe you have a big ask on your hands if you want to do that.
Okay.
Can I say something real fast?
Of course you can. Yeah.
I wonder if the World Health Organization could find people in the countries where these markets are an issue, if they could work with them in making their own standards instead of trying to be an even bigger power, if that would work better.
Yeah, the local control does become very, it becomes a huge part of these sort of things. And a lot of the conversation has been focused on China, which is still a relatively developed nation. There's an awful lot of live animal markets in places a lot less developed than China, and so it is an issue, certainly. Has anybody else got any other statements? And then we'll wrap up this debate in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first of all, unmute yourselves, give each other a big round of applause. That was really good. Well done, you guys. I suspected that one was going to be a somewhat spirited debate, and it did not disappoint, which is great. Now we have to do the formalities. So I'm going to set up a poll right now. Everybody, I want you to answer both questions. The first question is on what is your personal position on the debate. This is regardless of whether or not you took place or in the debate, and also what your actual position was. The second question is, which team do you think actually won the debate, regardless of your position? So even if the team that thinks the total opposite of what you thought, did they win the debate? I'm going to launch the poll now. Okay, it is up and live, so please answer both questions. Okay, there's one more person come in. Wow. Okay, I'm going to end this poll here. I always ask this, do you guys actually want to know the results? Okay, so I'm actually quite staggered at this. On the position of what is my position on the debate, what is my position on the topic, 57% of people are for banning live animal markets, but 43% aren't, which I thought it would be much more skewed to the for, to be honest, but it's interesting it's about 50-50. For the second question of who won the debate, regardless of my position, that was split the exact same split, but the other way. So it was the for team, got 43% of the vote, and the against team got 57% of the vote. That is one person has flipped. Basically, that's how close it was. So that's awesome. That was, yeah, that worked. That was great. Well done, you guys. Let me close this down. I'll ask that again in a second. Okay, so good. So now the second debate It would be great if those that were on the first debate could stay on, just because it's great to have an audience and it's great to have people watching. So we're now going to initiate the second debate. This debate is all single-use plastics should be banned in the USA. And we're going to start with the for team. So the team that is for banning all single-use plastics, they will get 4 minutes starting from now.
Plastics made from fossil fuels are just over a century old. Production and development of thousands of new plastic products accelerated after World War II and have not slowed down since. The conveniences plastic offers, however, led to a throwaway culture that reveals the material's dark side. Today, single-use plastics account for 40% of the plastic produced every year. Many of these products, such as plastic bag and food wrappers, have a lifespan of mere minutes to hours, yet they may persist in the environment for hundreds of years. It can take anything between 20 to 1,000 years for a plastic bag to break up. Plastic usually only breaks down into smaller pieces, but those that do break down into polymers and toxic chemicals. Plastics often contain additives, making them stronger, more flexible, and durable. But many of these additives can extend the life of products if they become litter, making the rate of breaking down even slower. Plastic production increased exponentially from 2.3 million tons in 1950 to 448 million tons by 2015. Production is expected to double by 2050. Plastic pollution has become one of the most pressing environmental issues as rapidly increasing production of disposable plastic products overwhelms the world's ability to deal with them. Plastic pollution is most visible in developing Asian and African countries where garbage collection systems are often inefficient or non-existent, but the developed world, especially in countries with low recycling rates, also have trouble properly collecting discarded plastics. Plastic trash has now become ubiquitous, and it has promoted efforts to write a global treaty negotiated by the United Nations. Millions of animals are killed by plastic every year. From birds to fish to other marine organisms, nearly 700 species, including endangered ones, are known to have been affected by plastics. Nearly every species of seabird eats plastic. It is now believed that there are 2.25 trillion pieces of plastic debris in the ocean. Of that mass, 269,000 tons float on the surface, while some 4 billion plastic microfibers per square kilometer litter the seafloor. Scientists have identified 200 areas declared as dead zones where no live organisms can grow. Most of the deaths to animals are caused by entanglement or starvation. Seals, whales, turtles, and other animals are strangled by abandoned fishing gear or discarded six-pack rings. Microplastics have been found in more than 100 aquatic species. George Leonard, chief scientist for the Ocean Conservancy, quotes, "The clock is ticking. We must confront this challenge before plastic overwhelms the planet." The move to a circular economy and an economic system aimed at eliminating waste is vital to reduce plastic pollution. Last year, 170 nations pledged to significantly reduce use of plastic by 2030, and many have already started by proposing or imposing rules on certain single-use plastics. Ireland introduced a 15-cent plastic bag tax and reduced their usage by 90% in 1 year. It is now at 22 cents. Kenya banned single-use plastic bags in 2017, and this June prohibited visitors from taking single-use plastics such as water bottles and disposable plates into national parks, forests, beaches, and conservation areas. The United Kingdom introduced a tax on plastic bags in 2015 and banned the sale of products containing microbeads like shower gels and face scrubs. China has announced a plan to ban non-degradable bags in all cities and towns by 2022. India instead of proposed a nationwide ban on plastic bags, cups, straws, and states are being asked to enforce the existing rules on the storage. There are a few states in the United States that are starting to have a plastic ban. New York, California, and Hawaii have banned single-use plastic bags, but there is no federal ban yet. After learning how great these small changes made, it is clear that the United States needs to catch up and insist on preventing any more plastic from hurting our planet. And that concludes our opening arguments.
Again, you were 4 minutes on the nose, so well done. Okay, we now have the arguments for the team against banning single-use plastics. You have 4 minutes starting from now.
Quick question. Do I have any teammates here? Is it just me? I think it's just me. Okay.
Sydney, speak to me afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. So Single-use plastics are actually harder on landfills. Paper products and cotton-based products take 9 times more space in landfills than plastics, and they actually take almost as much time to biodegrade. The carbon footprint on single-use plastics is smaller than paper or reusable products. They, specifically plastic bags, they require less water, chemicals to make them, and produce less greenhouse gas in their production than paper or cotton. They're lighter and smaller than other products, and therefore require less, the carbon footprint is smaller during their shipment. People would have to carry a reusable bag every day for a year, or reuse a paper bag 3 times to have the same impact. As far as health and safety goes, it shows that if people do reuse plastic bags, they're risking their health due to the bacteria and mold found in reusable plastics. In order to wash them, they regularly have to keep them sanitary, and it would make an even bigger impact on the environment due to the water used to keep them clean. Plastic is more sanitary and uses less water, and also it reduces food waste. Single-use plastics are more economic. They are cheaper to make. Single-use plastics, for instance, cost 3 to 5 cents in comparison to 5 to 25 cents for a paper bag, for instance. This keeps stores and customers from having to pay more for products. They're actually finding that reusable bags are not actually being reused. Studies have found that many reusable plastics or cotton bags are being treated as disposable and being thrown out after only a few uses. And they're actually, the plastics that they use for reusable bags are not as easily able to be recycled. Therefore, being reusable is actually harder on the environment in both their initial production and their disposal than single-use plastics. It also affects the economy in that switching to reusable plastics would hurt the 30,000 plus jobs in the United States that are in recycling and plastic manufacturing. And whereas many of the reusable bags come from overseas, and so shipping them actually creates an even bigger carbon footprint, as well as decreasing the economic benefits of employing people locally. And finally, the disposal issues. Most plastics found in the ocean are actually found there due to poor disposal practices, especially in the Asian countries, and that around 77 to 80% of plastics entering the ocean come from these places. So it's actually regulation that would improve the amount of plastic that's in the ocean. Thank you.
Okay, thank you there. And we'll now go on to the rebuttals. So we'll start off with the team that is for banning single-use plastics. And I want you to not present any new information, but just critique some of the arguments presented for why we shouldn't ban single-use plastics. You have 3 minutes starting now.
Okay, give me 1 second. Can I just say you did an awesome job for doing that by yourself? I don't know if that's how debates are supposed to work, but I have to say that. So with the argument of recycling, it would get rid of recycling jobs. I'm sorry, I wrote this all on a piece of paper. It's not pulling up. So, gosh, why isn't this working? I'm sorry.
I can make a point.
Okay, there's a stat on there about recycling. Something like 90% of the stuff that we recycle, but 90% of stuff isn't actually recyclable. So there's not really that much going to the recycling plants compared to how much we use that goes to the oceans or to the landfills. See, I don't need the paper, we're fine. And reusable bags. I found a lot of different numbers for how often a bag has to be reused to have a smaller carbon footprint than plastic bags. But one of the ones I saw is only 52 times to be reused. And I feel like if you bring that every time you go shopping, that's really not very much. And depending on the bag that you use, you can have a better working bag. Using paper bags instead of plastic bags isn't a long-term solution, and in fact is not encouraged by most of the places with a plastic bag ban, which is why they put fees on the paper bags when they get rid of the plastic bags. And because of your point that they take a lot to make, and single-use anything is a bad idea. And so with your point that people are using reusable bags as single-use bags, that kind of defeats the purpose of the argument of using a reusable bag.
Oh, we're losing you a bit, and you got 20 seconds if your team wants to make another point.
And I was also going to mention part of you mentioned that the reason why, or that you dislike that they're getting charged, customers and consumers are getting charged for using plastic or paper bags, but that's kind of the point. Ireland introduced that 15-cent plastic bag tax and reduced it by 90%, hoping that people would use those reusable bags more often. And the number the peer just gave, the 52, if a reusable bag is used once a week for a year, that equals out to instead using a plastic bag once. So just using one reusable bag every time you go to the grocery store each week. Yes.
Okay, you're there on time. That's 3 and a bit minutes. You only on site, but not by much. So, Sydney, if you'd like to present any, I know you were talking, and so you've done an awful lot of the heavy lifting, but if you can present any arguments against what the other team said, you can start now for 3 minutes.
I see your point about the benefit of reusable bags, but the problem is you can't regulate people and make them actually reuse those bags, and that they are finding in a lot of studies that people are using those bags maybe once or twice and then tossing them out. So the thinner plastics they find are easier to recycle and they're more biodegradable. So unless you're going to ban all plastic entirely, the single-use plastic is actually better for the environment. That's kind of what I got.
Good. So we'll now go on to closing statements. Each team, you have 1 minute closing statement just to reiterate your major points. The team for banning single-use plastics, you guys will go first. You have 1 minute starting now.
All right, in concluding the debate, we want to reaffirm our position that single-use plastics can and do cause extensive and prolonged damage to wildlife and the overall ecosystems in which they live. Because of this, it is ultimately beneficial for every country to take a stand in phasing out and eventually banning the use of single-use plastics in order to prevent further damage. Other countries and even some US states have already begun to implement plans to phase them out, and it is our responsibility to continue this trend and push this issue in order to have the rest of the world follow so that we can better our future. Thank you.
Okay, pretty much bang on a minute, so well done. And now we'll have the closing arguments for the team against banning single use. You have 1 minute starting now.
Okay, so in conclusion, single-use plastic or recyclable plastics are harder on landfills. The alternatives have a higher carbon footprint. They are worse for health and safety compared to single-use plastics, which keep things more sanitary. Single-use plastics are more economic. The disposable or the non-disposable type are not actually being reused, and it's better for the local jobs and economy. And a lot of the problems are not actually originating in this country. So as far as banning single-use plastics in the United States, it wouldn't actually improve the environment overall, because it's not just the United States, it's the majority of those of the pollution and litter is coming from other places.
Okay, good work. Righty, I'll now open up for questions. And it'll say in this one the same thing. Anybody can ask any question to any team. It sometimes works best if you direct who you're directing it to. We'll start that up right now.
So my question. Oh.
On you go. No.
It's for the people who are for banning the single-use plastics. So many single-use items are actually used by disabled, like people with disabilities. So if we no longer make or like allow the distribution of single-use plastics, what are they supposed to do when they rely on single-use plastics?
So I think the term banned, when we were first researching the subject, the term banned was too strong of a word, is what we kind of agreed with. Banning all plastics will be impossible for many, many years until we can create resources for people who are disabled who require single-use plastics to have access to those. But the start of the mission is get rid of grocery bags, get rid of single-use straws. It's not happening in 1 year, banning every single thing. It'll happen over 50 years, and we'll get to places where we can help people who do use single-use plastics and require them into better alternatives.
If I can add to that too, those articles that I read, they still let disabled people even use the straws. I think straws was the biggest issue that was pulled up, but there's already reusable straws that people can use and have access to.
Any other questions? Okay, well, since we got that through, we'll leave that there. So what we're going to do is the same poll as we did before. So I'll bring up the poll and it will be a two-parter. So the first part will be what is your position on this topic? The second part will be who do you think won the debate? So give me a second. It should come up now. Okay, is everybody in? Righty, normally I read these out, but this time I've just got to share this one with you. Give me a second, if I can work out how to do that. So, oh no, cancel, that's the wrong thing. Share results, can everybody see that? So we've got, what's my position on the debate? 4 is, what, 83%. 83% of folks said we should be getting rid of single-use plastics. Who won the debate? An exact 50-50 split. So there's a load of people who, even though are totally for banning them, voted the other way in terms of the winners. So that's great. I mean, a 50-50 split when it's an issue that's split is awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that now. Okay, so I'm going to just like to thank everybody for taking part in this debate. That was great. I think it worked really well. So well done. I'm giving another round of applause just because I can.